Hi, I'm Dr. Selina Matthews, spiritual psychologist, and I want to welcome you all to Soul Transformation. Today, I welcome Dr. Dennis Slattery back for another show. Dr. Slattery is an emeritus professor, scholar, author, and poet. Our topic today, aging, service to the soul. We are going to take a very different approach in this podcast. We are going to challenge your assumptions about aging and magnify it through the psychological lens of soul. We will explore the aging process from a personal perspective and then address the cultural considerations. I assure you, this is going to be a thought-provoking discussion. Thank you so much for being on the show today. It's very great to have you back, Dr. Slattery.
My pleasure. I'm glad to be back. Thank you.
You're welcome. Before we begin, could you define soul and give us a glimpse into how you have actually walked with soul throughout the lifespan?
Yeah, I was hoping you'd ask that question because I have a little surprise for you.
Oh, I love surprises.
Yeah, and this is one of those synchronistic things that I did not plan, but here we go. You know, I've always been fascinated with how the Greeks saw soul as a butterfly, a young maiden, Psyche, and her partner Eros. And the Greeks believed that this image of the butterfly was a symbol of spiritual growth, of deepening of consciousness, mythic consciousness, higher consciousness. So earlier today, I went to my painting class in Wimberley, about 40 minutes from here, and I finished a painting in gouache that I'm going to hold up and show you.
Oh my God, it's a butterfly, the symbol of transformation. And you just had your 80th birthday. Happy birthday. Wow, you have to frame that, Dennis. That is amazing. Absolutely amazing.
I thought I'd show it to you. I've been inspired by Charlie Harper's whimsical paintings for about the last 2 months, and I've been painting them. But this turned out so beautifully today, and I brought it home, and I thought, well, I'm going to bring this symbol in because I've been in the soul, creating the soul, for the last maybe month. You know, we meet once a week, and I was just so pleased with how it came out that I wanted to share it.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. What a treasure. Thank you for doing that. That is the symbol of our whole podcast now, the butterfly. So the butterfly theme of transformation is definitely going to be coming by.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so to speak even more about it, in spite of living a great deal of shame and fear in shame and fear as I grew up, I always felt something else was present. Call it desire, call it drive, call it purpose, call it obedience to something that was in me and yet transcended me. And I want to use the word soul for that felt sense. Soul is where the heart is excited, not the intellect. The soul is heartfelt, not an abstract or intellectual idea. And as I've grown older, the heart sense of things has just kind of taken over. And the intellect is now in the back seat. He's still there and he's writing, but the heart is up front now. I also trusted those brothers and priests in my high school in Cleveland, Ohio. There was an all-male Marianist Catholic school who encouraged me to run for student council office because they saw something in me that I did not see in myself. I think they saw what my soul was capable of, or even when I did not. And so I think life itself is a constant renegotiating of the qualities of soul that are heart seated. So I decided to risk my life rather than keep it buried under shame and scarcity.
What made your, at this point, I want to ask you so that the audience knows, what gave you the shame in your life? What was it that provided you the shame?
Yes. So I grew up in a violent alcoholic household with my three brothers and sister. But the older ones of us, I'm the second oldest, really took the brunt of it. And it was over years I recognized this was my father's rage over the realization of his unlived life.
Wow.
And I think he used alcohol as an attempt to numb him from that reality. And what it did is it created compassion in me, but only after decades. So every weekend, we were prepared for the outrage that began Saturday afternoon and went through Sunday evening. Now, this went on week in and week out, year in and year out, so that we metabolized his shame and anger. That's where he moved between. So we all have graduate degrees in how to be ashamed and how to be enraged. So that was the programming that set all of us into that dark place of never having a sense of who the heck we were, much less our purpose in being. And my older brother was acting out by stealing cars and getting into trouble. And finally, a judge said to him, "You can go to jail or you can enter the military." And so he joined the Navy at age 17, and he never returned home.
Wow.
He found life outside. And the 4 years in the military, he served on an aircraft carrier stationed in Naples, off the shore of Naples, Italy, was the best thing for him. I didn't need that, but he did. And he turned out wonderfully. Wound up being a fire chief of a fire department in Wickliffe, Ohio, and he made a life for himself. But he had to get out because his acting out was going to put him in jail for who knows how long. And then each of us, my other two brothers and then my sister, all suffered from it. So that was the ground. That was the ground that we walked on. And we judged everything by how much shame. So it was another way of speaking about it, Selina, is that we all live within the myth of scarcity.
Yeah.
Not enough. I'm not enough. I'm not good enough. Everybody else is better than me. They live in abundance. And of course, this was the fantasy. Who knows how many others were suffering violence in the house, with or without alcohol. But for us, this was how life was. And we assumed everybody else was living a more abundant life.
Right.
So that's the mythic framework that I grew up in. And yet, there were these inklings that there was something more in me and out in the world, and I couldn't suffocate it. So periodically, with reinforcement from elders who saw something in me that I was blind to, coached me along. And often it was teachers that were the source of this inspiration. Yeah. In undergraduate school, I can go on. I majored in what interested me. I didn't study for the sake of a job. I studied for the sake of the souls wanting to know about this field. And, part of the irony was that I gravitated towards courses in undergrad in psychopathology, in
Interesting.
abnormal psychology. So here's the via negativa in my life. The very thing that was crucifying me was attracting me to know about it on a level beyond shame and rage.
Right.
And so, in a way, my interest in psychology began through my father's addiction. Yeah. And when an offer came up to teach special needs students at a small school in Ravenna, Ohio, where my wife had been hired to teach 7th and 8th grade at a different school in the same system, I didn't understand what was happening until I read Joseph Campbell many years later. And a job offer came in the form of a phone call from the assistant superintendent. And he said, "Our special education teacher has just quit. Classes are starting next week. You're the husband of the woman we just hired. We'd like to know if you'd like the job." And I immediately said yes. The idea of having two incomes after living the life of undergraduate scarcity was very appealing. And he said, "That's fine. I want you to meet the principal next week. Come to the school." So I hung up the phone and I asked myself, what the hell is special education? I didn't have a clue. Are these bright kids? Are these slow kids? Are these troublemakers? But I answered the call. So when I went to the school to interview with the principal, he took me down into the basement to the old band room, painted blue, floors, walls, and he showed me 11 or 12 textbooks on a shelf. And he said, "This is your classroom." And he said, "I have two strict rules for you. Keep them quiet and keep them away from the normal students." And with that, he closed the door, and I stood in the middle of the room and asked, "What have you gotten yourself into?" I did not know, but there was a part of me that knew that teaching was going to be an important part of my life. And here I am, 65 years later, still teaching.
Well, yes, and you are a beloved emeritus professor. I mean, a beloved. I mean, so many of your students, connect with you continually. Even me, you were my advisor some 25 years ago, maybe more. And here we are still in relationship with me and 1,000 others. I mean, you are so unique at what you did. So what you're in some way saying that part of your life where the door was shut, your career in teaching all of us for the next 60 years began in whatever form it was so, your soul got ignited in that room.
Yes, thank you for that. And I have to say that students supporting me has been a huge part of my education. People like you and others, and even the kids I taught in high school, and then taught as undergrads, all fed me and taught me at least as much as I think I might have been given to them. So what I did, with the help of two wonderful women, I was the only male, except for the principal, in the building. Men did not teach special education.
No, not at that time. No.
No, but here's how Providence was working. As Vietnam heated up, so I taught these students from 1968 till 1970. Vietnam was heating up. Student deferments out the window. Married out the window. Teaching out the window. Student out the window, except for one area: males teaching special education.
Oh my God. I'm just getting shivers through my body, Dennis. Oh my God. I can't believe that. It was like the divine had taken you out of that trajectory. It's
Yes.
like if you are listening to a deeper place inside of you, the divine takes you there. You don't have to do anything.
Yes, see, that's beautifully said. At certain points, one is best not trying to run the supermarket,
Right.
just to let things unfold. And when I finished the 2 years, I was old enough that the military was not any longer interested in me. And then a position opened up. Well, I wanted to say one other thing about these students. With the two women that were so mentoring to me, they taught me how to do lesson plans. So I set up 3 different curriculum with 3 to 4 students in each, grades 1 through 5. And I would teach them in little pockets. There were, except for when the art teacher and the music teacher came in, 2 wonderful men, and the students loved them, and we would sing, and the other would teach them art. And, you know, I just find, looking back, if you let things cobble themselves together, often that is the best plan than you could ever make up on your own as you try to control it. And that's a lesson that I've stayed with through where I wound up teaching, and then where I wound up as a student at Kent State, and then where I wound up teaching at Pacifica. So when I went to high school, to teach high school at Lorraine Catholic, there was a very progressive sister of the Immaculate Heart of Mary. And she was goading her faculty to stop teaching the same thing out of the same books year in and year out and try something new. And so I approached her and I said, would it be a crazy thing for me to start a psychology department here in the high school? And the faculty would be one, me. Maybe we would hire somebody down the road, but she said, do it, set it up. So I did. And then I was teaching a lot of different courses, but I would teach a basic course in Jung and Freud. They were surveys, and Skinner and others, just to get that psychological language in. So I said to her, let's keep it to 2 sections, juniors and seniors. And she said, that's fine. So they opened it up, and 4 sections filled up. The students were starving for a place to speak that wasn't their religion class. And so they were wonderful to teach. And then after a point, I said, maybe the second year, it was, I said, what would it be like if I could take 5 really sharp seniors and we would design a course, and it would be on existentialism? She said, set it up. And so I had a Volkswagen van at the time. I piled them in. We drove down to Oberlin, which is where Sandy and I were living. It was 12 miles south of Lorraine. And we went into Oberlin's magnificent bookstore, and we pulled down 3 or 4 texts that I was going to order for copies for all of us. Here again, books become a divine destiny agent.
Yes.
One of the books, edited by Rollo May, was a case book on existential psychology and psychiatry. And I showed the book to them and I said, this would be a wonderful kind of a survey book. And a lot of Dutch and French phenomenologists. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know what the word meant, but it attracted me. And they said, yeah, let's make it one of the books. So we began reading, and I became fascinated with phenomenology. And so I wrote Duquesne University, which is still, I think, the premier phenomenology school in the U.S. And 400 of us applied for 14 slots.
Wow.
They put me on a standby list, and then Father Murray, head of the program, wrote me the rejection letter. He said all 14 snapped their spaces up. But then he said, there's a little Catholic university in Irving, Texas, called the University of Dallas. And some of our graduates, including Robert Romanishan, are going to start a PhD in phenomenology. Why don't you look into it? That's how I wound up at the University of Dallas. So again, here's Campbell. When a door closes, instead of pouting, look around. There might be a window half open. There might be another door that's ajar. Go through that one. This door wasn't for you. Now, I learned all this in retrospect and have nothing but high praise for Campbell's mythological insights into how life operates. And so I went there and I began to major in literature and minor in phenomenology. No, I majored in phenomenology and minored in literature until I took Louise Cowan's Russian novel class, and I realized my soul wants to be in the literary world of classics.
And how many books have you written now? Because you've written many. How many books and articles have you written?
Well, on books, I'm 90% finished with my 34th book.
Wow.
I hope that in another 5 weeks, it'll be done. I'm proofreading it now. And here's the title. You might enjoy the title, if I can remember it. I'm blocking. Let me think. Becoming Stories.
Wow.
Essays and poems on mythic moments.
Wow.
Yeah. Becoming stories, because we're all becoming stories every day of our lives. And that title, I can't say where it came from, but it fit, and so I've hung on to it.
I love the title name. I love the title name. I think the title name is absolutely super appropriate for where you're at. You're in your eighth decade, which is friggin' amazing, and the story of your life. One thing I want to ask you, because we're going to have to move a little quicker in terms of the questions. Yeah. I wanted just to talk to you. You had a difficult childhood because of your father's alcoholism. 20, 40, 60, 80. You had to wrestle with that your entire life. Anyone, whether you have a malignant narcissistic parent like I have, or a alcoholic parent, or a bipolar parent, it completely affects the trajectory of your life. And
Agreed.
So I want to ask you directly here, through the decades, because you weren't able to metabolize or process it in the 20s or 30s. When did you actually start processing what had happened in your childhood? And would you consider it a lifelong journey?
Yeah, that's really good. I can tell you the moment. I was 20, and I was taking classes at a community college, the first one in the state of Ohio, Cuyahoga Community College. and I was working as a deputy bailiff for Euclid Municipal Court. So I'm sitting studying one morning, Monday morning at 10 a.m., and my father walks through the front door. And I said, Dad, what are you doing home? He said, they just fired me. Now, he had been working for the Cleveland Electric Illuminating Company for 29 years. The cynical side of me said they unloaded him so they wouldn't have to pay him a pension. And there's probably truth to that.
Yeah.
He never took another drink from that day forward. And I knew that something deeply wounding and maybe liberating at the same time was taking place in him from that day forward. And he and my mother, God bless her, they retrieved the romance of their marriage, started doing things together. My mother was a wonderful ice skater, and she loved to skate on the Euclid skating ring outside. And my father would go with her, and they did everything together. So I think that's the moment that something softened the anger and rage in me to see him in a new light. Now, he still lived out the patterns of the alcoholic, but not the rage, not the anger. And I won't go into this now, but through a series of events, I wound up getting him a job in Euclid Municipal Court because he was so good with numbers. He should have been an accountant. He was a brilliant man, a degree from John Carroll University in philosophy. Brilliant guy. So in a series of divine moves, he wound up as the accountant at Euclid Municipal Court and kept that job for 15 years before he retired. Yeah. So I like to think that God put me in a place to help him fulfill a desire to be an accountant. And they loved him. None of the other five in the court, who I knew well because I worked there, wanted to touch the accounting. So my father came in like a savior. And he was not drinking. He was sober, and he was affable. He had a good sense of humor. So that's how it got passed down, or maybe passed up from the son to the father.
Well, it's interesting. That's a total turnaround. What wounds do you still carry from your childhood? Like when your 80th year, what?
Yeah.
This is a tough one.
Yeah. How would I want to answer that?
And I'm going to ask another one along with this. Do you think some of these wounds have shortened or narrowed your life's possibilities?
Oh, they did. Yeah. So, when I was paying my own way through high school and further, I worked in the supermarkets, in the produce department or bagging, because it was union. And the union pay was really good. But I couldn't imagine myself doing anything else but working in a produce department. Now, one side was practical. It paid the bills when my father's drinking sapped any extra money in the house. But I also ask myself now, was that a smokescreen for not wanting to stretch further? And I think so. It may have been expediency. It may have been a place to hold me because the time was just not right to stretch out. I'd never thought about, waiting tables, getting a job in a restaurant, doing so many other opportunities because my my blinders were right here. And so there was none of this opening out until later. Yeah. And, I enjoyed helping customers who would ask me about these frozen foods or these produce, or do you have any fresh corn in the back? And let me go back there and get you a dozen. They just came in on the truck. And I found that I liked getting out of myself and serving other people in ways that they couldn't, because they didn't have access to the back room, to the freezer. And I found I like this, helping other people. It makes me feel better about myself. So that was a real breakthrough for me.
Yeah, and actually, Dennis, your whole life you've been helping all your students. I mean, all of that. Your whole life has been all about helping people, helping us grow, helping us, with in terms of gain knowledge, gain all kinds of information.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to move to. Yeah,
Yes.
I'll let you finish that, and then I want to move to the next question.
Yeah. I love another way of saying some of the floorboards coming up from the floorboards of consciousness. It's what's to be heard. It's another way of saying, in a favorite phrase of James Hollis, being summoned to a destiny. And I like that word, summoning. He uses it often in his writing. But whether we're 20 or 46 or 79 or 84, we're always being summoned by what the soul needs and desires. And that's the eros of the eros psyche marriage, if you will. And so it pushes one not to begin living a replica of someone else's summoning, because then you're not living the authentic life that you've been given to develop and further, and truly to nourish one's own soul, not the soul of the community, but first one's own soul. It has to be felt there first.
100%. Have you? Because I think this happens in people's lives. Have there been choices in your life that have been made by others for you, and have you gone in that direction, or did you revolt?
Both. I think there were moments where, in retrospect, I have to question, was that an authentic move on my part, or was it a compromise that wasn't so radical that I'm full of regret at this time in my life? And so your question is so good, Selina, because it puts one in that paradoxical place. Was the choice that I made not mine, but the one that needed to be made in aiding me to the right place, to that moment of kairos, to the right timing, where then I could say, now this is my call. Yeah, it's really a good question. And it puts us in that place of paradox, which is so rich to maneuver through. Mm-hmm. So the two things may both have equal value. They just are paradoxical, not contradictory. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, and I felt that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did society at large, because you were on a soul journey, I mean, it was labyrinthian because you never knew where you were going. You just moved with the flow of, and this is not what's happening in our society today.
No.
People aren't moving with flow and divine energy, something that we were taught at Pacifica, and that you helped me to put that in and articulate it in my work as well. But did society at large influence you in any way? How did it influence you?
Speed. I got caught in the mythology of speed, what's next, not giving myself enough time to reflect on what has just happened, and what my life in retrospect, and this is not an old recognition, it's fairly new, is the absolute virtue of the pause. Pause, take a deep breath. That brings me to consciousness in a way that I thought, how it can't be this simple, and yet it is. So to begin to intrude the pause after something has been completed or after I need to take a break, catch my breath, broke that hypnosis that there's no time to lose and you need to get to the next thing, because to progress, you need to be moving all the time. And that's broken. But boy, that was a hard
I'm sure.
resistance.
I'm sure.
Yes.
Because society is just like jamming that, our culture is jamming that down our throats.
Yes.
Every day, the media, the news, whatever. And it's jamming around the youth of our, the youth. You have to do this. You have to, at 16, know what you want. You have to go to the right schools. You have to, my goodness, I almost can have a panic attack for them, because they're being pushed at such a great velocity. I just don't know what's going to happen down the road, because I can't see them making the right choices at 14, 15. Some people can, but not the majority. That's not the majority of the human experience. My last question in this section, before we move to the next one, is how do you interact with your spiritual life? And is it different? Was it different during the different decades?
Oh gosh, it's such a wonderful question. Yes, so different. The divine, I think, matures with age. The divine matures with age. Like poetry or literature or the arts generally, the divine, I think, continues to reshape its boundaries and its contours to accommodate where the soul life, conveyed as spirit, reveals itself for further meditation. I've always been a believing Catholic. For the longest period, Sandy and I stopped going to Mass, stopped going to communion. We've retrieved it because it means something to us now. Instead of the rote, same old, this is the Mass we were at last week, and we just stopped. So, I hesitate to use the word God here, but I really have to. God for me is the interaction with this principle of goodness and kindness that has deepened over time. It feels so much more personal and real than the abstraction of the divine in earlier years. God is this, God will do this, but it was like hearing the word democracy time and again. It numbed me into, what is this really? What is this abstraction called God? Because it has no personal validity in my life.
Right.
I believe in it, and my belief in it doesn't validate it as a human experience, a felt experience. Yeah.
Now, I want to move to the collective, because
Okay.
this is take us to a whole new other, and we're going to talk about democracy here. So in my office, I see a lot of elders that are being over medicated. Dennis, I am horrified when I see them on in a virtual session. They're drooling. They can barely speak. We all know that over medication anesthetizes them and renders them invisible to the world and completely disconnects them from soul. Statistics show that 85% of seniors are on prescription drugs. These numbers are on an increasing trajectory because we all are aging. And I have two very specific questions for you in this area. How would you overframe how would you frame the over medication of seniors at this time? And what is happening in our culture that allows this to be an accepted protocol?
Yeah, beautiful. And I can't even imagine the stories that you hear with your patients, your clients. It's hard to imagine, but you have been experiencing this directly. Medication is such a rich metaphor. It's a literal thing, but it is a metaphor that goes out and out. To medicate originally meant, in the Greek, to cure or to heal. Not sure if the medical world still remembers its origins. Do no harm. My goodness. So as you say, so many of the older clients you see are over-medicated, medicated in excess, which violates the Greek wisdom, everything in moderation.
Yep.
And in living a life, finding the space between excess and deficiency, which for the Greeks was the golden mean. That's what virtue was, to find that mean between. The sense of moderation suggests that in many parts of the medical world, it's been completely eviscerated, lost, discarded as irrelevant. To medicate seniors, as you have been pointing out, is to keep them domesticated, perhaps silent, and maybe even self-annihilating, because the soul is disconnected, as you just pointed out. The over part of your excellent question is just that. Over the top, overwrought, overdone, overprescribed. It also suggests to me that the seniors' lives are over as fully engaged human beings. The medical world itself is over-medicated in believing that over-medicating their patients, is an inherent, valued response to their patient's limitations. So where there is deficiency, they come in with excess. And the golden mean is just completely out of the picture, out of the equation.
Mm-hmm.
So the seniors fall victim to the overdone profession that is ostensibly there to cure and to heal. Rather, it is to quiet and to hide these seniors, segregating them from a fuller life they're capable of living, even within their many restrictions. See, this kind of absolutism, black and white. You're restricted, so we're going to over-medicate you, completely disowns what value a life can have within restrictions.
Yeah.
But to cancel that is to show how the addiction is with the medical profession and finally with the culture at large.
Yeah, no, 100%. I agree with you 100%. Go ahead.
Culturally, the forces in our culture are glutted with excesses. Anti-aging tactics with eliminating wrinkles that show aging. I listened to an ad 2 to 3 days ago that used the term anti-aging to see their cream that is like an iron to smooth out wrinkles in their before and after photos. And who would trust such hyperbole? So what is the addiction working here? Well, and you've already touched on it, addiction to youth or to some semblance of staying young. It's almost grotesque. And they brazenly and to sell the product use the term anti-aging. We're against it. It's the foe. It's the enemy. And our cream is going to help you override it. So there's a naivete, Selina, and an innocence, a culture of denial of the fundamental organic life process. That's terrifying.
Yep, it is terrifying, and it's terrifying when I see, people that have, I'm not opposed to getting a little bit of work done. I'm not opposed to that, but I am opposed to people completely restructuring and changing their faces to become these grotesque beings that have these gigantic lips and their skin is so stretched that they actually look weird, and that's becoming the norm. And I'm seeing on all the acting, on all Netflix and the different shows, all the actresses, I can see them the day they get their lip injections. I mean, it's like, I'm like, do they realize what they look like? I mean, like a little is good, a lot, I don't think so. And I think, there is vanity in taking care of yourself, of course. But what I'm seeing is actually, it's moving to the place of horror.
Yes.
It's moving to horror.
So that it's anti-human.
Yes, it's anti-human. Thank you. I love that. It's anti-human because it's no longer human.
No.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. Thank you. Anti-human. People are becoming anti-human, not part of the human experience, part of an alien thing. And it's almost alien. There's another, probably a better word that you could come up with, but it's not normal. It's way off.
No, I like alien because we watch how that word, how alien people, according to one wag, came into Springfield, Ohio, and began eating cats and dogs. So you alienate people by getting them as aliens. And in the way that we're using the term, the alien is the anti-human.
Yeah.
And with the anti, I would add one other piece, along with the idolatry of youth. They're anti-historical. They're anti-memorial. They don't care about the past.
Explain
the sense of living at a time, but within a historical matrix.
Mm-hmm.
There's a history to me, to my family, to the Irish in America, and back and back. And there is a future. And I live in a space between history and the future. But what happens when those are clipped from a person in a excessive form of innocence where the past is irrelevant because it's past? How naive that is.
Yeah.
And the future, well, it's going to take care of itself by and large.
Yeah.
So these are excesses on both sides.
Yeah.
And I think it feeds the fuel of then corralling people like cattle by ethnicity, race, health challenges, physical impairments that fall out of acceptance by the larger communal soul.
Right.
So it's the shrinking of humanity's realities and its potentials.
Yeah.
And
No.
that's 1984.
Yep.
Of Orwell.
100%. 1984.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And right now I want to move to since we're on 1984, because I think this is a good segue. What are the other forms of medication, symbolic or literal, that you think are anesthetizing the masses so they cannot touch or feel life?
Yes. Okay, good. No, it's a really important question, and it's a tough one. But you like to ask tough questions, and I like to wrestle with them. So we're on the same page. What has made me insensitive is far too much introspection that allows me to forget the suffering of others in a wider, wilder, and desperate context. News media outlets can be of great service in showing us the devastations in our own country, from climate catastrophes to the 500,000 Lebanese without food or water, and who may collectively starve to death. So the leaders are saying, okay, and this is going on right now, let us have 30 days to work out the plans to help the Lebanese. But all these people are speaking with full stomachs about a people who need to wait another 30 days, who have not eaten, and there's hundreds of thousands of them, who have not eaten in days, and whose stomachs are constantly empty, and who have no fresh, clean water to drink. So that's the insensitivity that spirals out into the culture, where policy agendas override the very real starvation of tens of thousands of people, right as you and I are speaking today. It's another form of the grotesque.
Yeah.
How can this be, and how can we call ourselves human beings? So
do you think that the media also is part of that? Part of that anesthetizing the human experience by just giving us their perspective?
Yes.
And how do you see it? How do you see that?
I see it in my visceral, and Sandy shares this, a visceral response and visceral resistance to even turning on the news. Because we kind of know the stories before they're going to be articulated. Now, there's always new things like the assassination of the leader of Hamas, I think today.
Yeah.
But it's all spectacle. It's spectacular. It's over the top. It's excess. Report on the most grim situations and conditions. And it's good to know what's going on, but the 24/7 news cycle, I think, anesthetizes all of us to the stories, because the deep patterns are the same again and again. The particulars shift. And then in between, and this is why I just wonder about the news people who must, after reporting some horrific story, say, stay tuned. We've got 2 minutes of commercials. We'll be right back. And it's so jarring. It's so, what you just told me, there's no time to reflect on it, because the corporate world wants to sell us different creams and foods. And so there's some radical disconnect, disorientation. No wonder people are confused about what to believe, because the glut of options, true and false, is so relentless that I think it exhausts the soul of anyone paying attention.
Yeah.
And so if people tune out, I can understand it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, for sure. What about democracy?
Yeah.
This is the big one.
Yeah,
Do
it is.
you
And
think democracy anesthetizes the population?
I think the term, I wish we could strike it from our vocabulary and rather say, by democracy, I mean, and give particulars of what you're talking about. But this existential threat to democracy, I changed the channel because there's the death of the imagination in that kind of speaking, and the arguments
Can you
that
extrapolate on that? What is the death of the imagination? What do you mean by that?
everything is literal. Everything is. I don't want to use the word practical. Literal. It's the death of the imagination is the rise of literalism. Everything's to be taken literally, even lies. Take my lies literally. So the imagination has no room to move, to shuffle through, to catalog in some way, to find analogies. What's the metaphor that's alive in these stories of scarcity that are harming full populations in cities and states globally? Yeah, I think the curse is the curse of literalism, not concrete. You can be concrete, but I think literalism is a different animal. It freezes things into cliches that are to be repeated once after another, and the imagination atrophies.
How do you think that the media could actually find their way back to actually the place of education, the place of soul? How do you think that's possible? Or do you think we're too far gone at this point?
You know, it's such a good question because last week, tired of the regular channels, I went to PBS's NewsHour at 6. Oh my gosh, they are in a different galaxy. They report the stories, but there's a soulfulness in their presentations, and there was a deepening. As I listened, I was learning something, and I'm asking myself, why isn't the story that they're telling me right now on all the big networks? The PBS NewsHour has decided fewer stories, more in depth, more reflection. And I thought, we need to start watching this or recording it, watching it the next day. And I thought, what would this, to your question, what would this be like if the thoughtfulness, which also means fewer stories, not bombarding the audience with one thing after another with no break, be shared among them? Oh, it would change everything because people would be encouraged, even insisted upon, take this story in. Now imagine it with us. And what are you learning from it? And so that numbness, I didn't feel for 10 seconds in the full news hour.
So what you're saying is the manner in which the anchors were talking about the story enabled you to metabolize what was happening and think about it in a way that in opposition, the other more traditional news stations are just shooting you like bullets with information. True or fake, doesn't matter. They're just shooting you with bullets, but they're not you're not able to metabolize it because it's such a direct hit nonstop that you can't, you don't have the time or the minute to actually metabolize it. So what you're saying is what they're doing at PBS is allowing for the metabolism of a human like me or you to actually integrate that information.
Beautifully said. And even their reporter on the ground offered particularities, like following one young girl, 6, 7 years old, as she plowed through the dust in Beirut with a doll hanging from her right hand, almost with no expression on her face. She's traumatized from the war, and all around her is nothing but rubble. There's an artistic, if I can use that term, there's an aesthetic about the presentation that makes me feel that child, and the news and that story stays with her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you have a chance to feel what she is probably feeling. Whereas the other networks, it's move on to the next interviewer or to the next story. It's giving it time to ripen in the imagination. Yeah, that's how that's what I wanted to say.
Yeah, that's beautifully said. Beautifully said.
Thank you.
So, what can we do to wake people up with, so that they can connect with their soul and actually serve her?
Yeah, that's hard. Encourage reflection. Write op-eds. That's one of my favorite ways, 600 words to make one point. And will people read them? I don't know. They seem to, but finding outlets. Finding outlets. And I know that's a general statement. Working at a food bank, once a week. Working in a home for those who are invalids, and maybe reading to them. I think it's going to have to happen in small steps with individuals. I don't think taking taking a mass approach, unless, as some are doing, making a film that is so powerful it stops everyone in their tracks.
Yeah.
100%.
100%. Wow. That would be, okay. We need some documentary filmmakers.
No, exactly.
No, absolutely. And for the final question, well, I have two. One we're going to do briefly. Just if you can talk about a couple of books that you just briefly about that you want to suggest, and I'm going to have Ken, my video producer, put them through so that they will people will be able to see them. So briefly talk about that, and what gives you pleasure and delights you at this stage of your life?
Yeah, beautiful. I like both of them. I love Connie Zweig's The Inner Work of Age, Shifting from Role to Soul.
I actually interviewed her on that book. I interviewed her. And
glad. I love it.
Yeah, she's amazing. Amazing.
She's an amazing person.
Yeah.
And that Eating the Shadow on the Spiritual Path is another one of hers. I really like Robert Johnson's Living Your Unlived Life. I love Jim Hollis's Finding Meaning in the Second Half of Life. I'm rereading and loving James Hillman's The Force of Character and The Lasting Life. Also, there's this book that a former colleague introduced me to years ago by the philosopher Daniel Klein, Travels with Epicurus, A Journey to a Greek Island in Search of a Fulfilled Life.
Wow.
Magnificent meditations. Also, in older life, Shakespeare's King Lear. Sophocles' Oedipus at Colonus.
Yeah.
Sophocles wrote it when he was 90.
Wow.
And I also think the myth of Demeter and Persephone is worth returning to for the old and the young. Yeah. What gives me joy, pleasure? Sharing what I know and what I think I know with you and participants in this rich Temenos that we've had today. I also love teaching online. I still love writing. That gives me joy. Being a grandfather to 3 lovely grandchildren and sharing with them who I am at this moment in my life. Being married to Sandy for 56 years gives me joy every day. We met in 1966 at Kent State and married in 1968.
Wow.
Watching classic movies, swimming, walking in the early morning down to the Guadalupe River to see what wild birds will show up on the water. Learning generally. My mentor, Louise Cowan, observed to us in graduate school, there is a joy in simply learning, often learning for its own sake, not for another purpose. I think she was telling us that the joy emanates largely from the soul satisfaction in this divinely human enterprise, and also noticing what in my own character, emerging more sharply at this moment, is deeply satisfying. And that takes me back to the beginning of our talk. Finding out who one is at this later stage of life is joyful, even in the pain of limits and limitations.
Wow.
Yeah, those are a few that keep my blood flowing.
Wow, that is amazing. And of course, you're painting the beautiful butterfly that you painted, the symbol of your 80th decade. How amazing. I'm going to have you take a picture of it so that we can have it on our podcast. And it's really incredible. So thank you for this incredibly deep, rich, transformative talk on aging and service to soul. Really incredible. Thank you so very much for all that you've done, being my advisor, for just being one of these most incredible professors I've ever had. I'm deeply grateful. Thank you.
My gratitude to you, Selina. Thank you so much.